Satellite images reveal puzzling shapes in the Middle East.
What are they doing in the middle of the desert?
Aerial images unearth evidence of lost cities in the Amazon.
These shapes have been here a long time, most likely thousands of years.
Drone footage captures a surreal image.
There are over 500 of these turreted castles, and not a person in sight.
And an aerial glimpse at a deserted island with a dark past.
You've got to ask, was this castle actually inhabited at some point? Because no one lives there now.
Everywhere we look on our planet, there's evidence of the past. In nature, in buildings, in relics. Each holds a mystery that technology now allows us to see from above. What new secrets are revealed? With our ability to survey the planet from above, humanity is rediscovering many long-forgotten places. Significant sites that, for one reason or another, have all been abandoned. Much can be learned from these deserted locations, as each one has a story to tell. Along the border between southern Jordan and Saudi Arabia, hidden in the desolate desert landscape, satellite imagery reveals something unusual.
It's perfectly symmetrical. Doesn't look like a natural formation.
It's a giant rectangle in the middle of the desert.
This part of Jordan is essentially a barren desert, and it's extremely isolated.
The strange shape seems to have been built using earth from the surrounding desert terrain.
So what is this thing? Who put it here? And why does it appear to be deserted?
The mysterious shape measures 65 meters wide and 95 meters in length, a bit longer than New York's Statue of Liberty. But from satellite, it looks no bigger than a postage stamp.
Happening upon this rectangle right in the middle of the desert, I mean, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. So how in heavens was it found?
The shape was first discovered by archaeologists from the University of Oxford, part of a project called Amina.
Throughout the whole of Jordan, there are very, very few sites of this particular type. So suddenly to see something very isolated was unusual. And then given the shape of it and the size of it, it was a very exciting discovery. The purpose of the Amina project is to try and record as many archaeological sites as possible, but then also assess the threats to them.
Major threats include population expansion, human conflict, and the increasing impacts of climate change. But in order to find and document these endangered sites, Amina uses a form of aerial archaeology known as remote sensing.
The staff on the Amina project will look at publicly available satellite imagery and literally look kilometer by kilometer, checking areas to see whether there are any archaeological sites.
Roughly 40 kilometers to the west, researchers discover something startling: a second rectangular shape.
This rectangle is virtually identical to the first in shape and size.
So what we're now looking at are two unexplained formations in the middle of this vast desert.
Matching rectangles, separated by vast swaths of desert terrain. Are they somehow connected? And if so, for what purpose? Perhaps the view from above will offer clues. This time, just 180 kilometers northwest, in Israel's Masada National Park.
This is the site of the infamous siege of Masada, which took place in the 1st century.
It was the site of a mountain fortress in the Judean desert, and it was the final holdout of the Jewish revolt against Rome's conquering armies.
The fortress on the mountain was thought to be impregnable, but the Roman army built this enormous ramp to scale the mountain's sheer cliffs and force their way inside. The ramp is 600 meters long and 61 meters high. That's as tall as a 20-story building.
And almost 2,000 years later, you can still see it right here.
And the view above Masada reveals something else.
At the base of the mountain, there's this large rectangular shape.
This structure is all that remains of a Roman military camp. And we know that that housed some of the 8,000 to 10,000 troops that took part in the siege.
These encampments, or castra as they're known, were built to house and protect the soldiers when they weren't fighting or marching.
In fact, it was really pretty common practice for most major units operating in the field to have a properly constructed camp to retire to at the end of every day. And with this massive force of labor provided by the soldiers, they could construct a camp in a matter of hours, even while under attack.
As the view from above reveals, the camp perimeters were shaped using nearby earth and stone.
It's believed that the Romans had a repertoire of plans for these temporary settlements that they could pull out and build depending on how long they might be staying in any given location.
So you've got some camps that are short-term, where soldiers would sleep in tents, while you've got other camps that are going to be more permanent, and they'll contain barracks. The shape of this Roman camp is similar to the rectangular shapes found in Jordan, and it even seems to have the same sort of rounded corners.
This rectangle with curved edges was a common form for Roman camps and forts, and the shape is often referred to as the classic playing card.
Could this be what we're seeing in Jordan, the remains of 2 deserted Roman military camps? It wouldn't be the first time an abandoned Roman camp has revealed itself, as seen with a view from above.
This is Spain's As Conchas Reservoir. After a summer of heat waves, a severe drought causes the reservoir's waters to reach dangerously low levels. But what the drought reveals is something that had been kept hidden underwater for many, many years. An abandoned Roman fort.
It's known as the Aquis Quercunes and is believed to have been built in 75 CE.
The Romans used this site as a temporary fort and a kind of military barracks while they were constructing parts of their famous road system.
The fort had everything from an infirmary to a temple and sleeping quarters that could house up to 600 soldiers.
The fort was abandoned in around 120 CE and pretty much forgotten about until the 1920s, when it was discovered by a local archaeologist.
But how did this long deserted fort end up submerged underwater? Once again, the view from above holds the key.
In the 1940s, a giant hydroelectric dam was built downriver, flooding the entire area and submerging the site.
But now that this Roman encampment has kind of re-emerged after decades underwater, the view from above reveals something really familiar. That classic playing card shape.
It also shows another typical characteristic of the Romans' designs. 4 symmetrical entrances, one on each side of the rectangle. The sites in Jordan appear to show traces of similar entrances around the perimeter.
On the actual photographs that you can see, there are gaps in the sides and even at the top end as well, which are ways in which the soldiers would come in and out of the camp. But on the outside, you can perhaps see this little bar, and we refer to that as a titulum. The Romans had a very structured way of doing things, so every Roman camp has some sort of entrance as the ones you're seeing. And it's a way of just controlling who's coming in and who's coming out. And the fact that we've got those entrances, this confirms that they are Roman camps.
All the evidence in Jordan points to Roman camps, but there's no historical record of Roman military campaigns this far east into Arabia. What were the Romans doing here?
Why build these 2 camps in the middle of the desert?
And before experts can begin to answer these questions, the view from above reveals an even larger mystery.
There's a 3rd rectangle, and this one appears to be much bigger.
This 3rd rectangle measures 125 by 105 meters, larger in area than the first 2 camps combined.
It has the same familiar playing card design, indicative of a Roman camp, along with symmetrical entrances at opposing ends. This 3rd camp is located west of the other 2, and fittingly, the 3 camps have been called West Camp, Center Camp, and East Camp.
Why is this third deserted camp so much larger than the other two? Could its size help us piece together this mystery?
So there's a line of 3 camps, and our interpretation is that the one that is further to the west is the largest because the Roman soldiers are coming from the west, and then they reduce in size, possibly because they either lost people on the way or they decided that they couldn't go in that environment with as many people to the next camp and the next camp. So probably size of the expeditionary force reduced over time, and a very short period of time. Although it would have been a reasonable-sized military campaign, it's not recorded in any history book or anything else. We know nothing about it.
Interestingly, these 3 camps are located too far apart from each other for infantry to have marched the distance in a day. This supports a theory that these camps were possibly for mounted troops, and perhaps troops that were riding camels.
Military camps capable of housing hundreds of troops. Could long-forgotten battles have once been waged on these desert plains? And if so, what might the Romans have been fighting for? To the southeast, in what is now Saudi Arabia, a deserted desert settlement may provide answers.
This is Hegra, and thousands of years ago, it was part of a state known as the Nabatean Kingdom.
The Nabateans built a kingdom that went from as far north as Syria and down into what is modern Saudi Arabia, that had a fantastic trade network. So the Romans clearly wanted a piece of this, and the Romans annexed the Nabatean kingdom into part of what became their Arabian province. And it's always understood to have been an agreement between the two peoples, the Romans and the Nabateans.
Have the historians got it right? Was this takeover a peaceful agreement? Or does this new view from above suggest a different, even violent history?
What makes this discovery interesting is that it probably proves that the Roman annexation of Nabatea wasn't as peaceful as we originally thought.
As experts begin to put the pieces together, how will aerial archaeology and the view from above help in rewriting this chapter of ancient Roman history?
We hope that by continuing the remote sensing, we might find other ones, because that's the great thing about archaeology. We don't know what we don't know, and I think that's very exciting.
We're only beginning to understand how these camps may have been used in the Romans' takeover of the Nabatean kingdom.
It's incredible that these traces remain, given the fact that they may only have been used for a few short weeks, or maybe even days.
If you look at the current state of these 3 camps, it's really incredible. You've got to consider that they've been sitting here like that for nearly 2,000 years.
And who knows how long they would have sat here undiscovered had it not been for our ability to survey the planet from above.
And this is why it's so important for projects like EMINA to find and document these sorts of sites before they're gone forever.
From abandoned Roman camps in a desolate desert landscape to a lush tropical ecosystem where another deserted location conceals ancient mysteries from the past. The Amazon, the Earth's largest rainforest, spanning 8 countries and covering nearly 7 million square kilometers. This dense jungle environment remains one of the most unexplored areas on the planet.
Its sheer vastness and challenging terrain don't exactly make it the most welcoming.
Within its expanse, you might encounter jaguars, the green anaconda, poison dart frogs, among other dangerous creatures.
As a result, the Amazon has long been seen as a place of mystery and intrigue.
And it's here, along the border of Brazil and Bolivia, that satellite imagery reveals something perplexing. A series of strange shapes scattered across the landscape.
What are they? And why are they here?
Did somebody make these? And if so, when?
Hundreds of geometric shapes spanning thousands of square kilometers, only uncovered and visible from above due to recent deforestation.
These formations seem to vary in shape and size, but the majority appear to be large circles and squares.
Could a clue to their age and origin lie in how they were made?
They are clearly some sort of earthworks. They're made by moving soil, digging ditches, and building mountains.
Earthworks can be found around the world, often created by ancient cultures as important ceremonial sites.
Could these be the remnants of similar ritualistic places?
Experts haven't come to a consensus on who may have built these earthworks in Brazil, but they may very well have been religious or ceremonial in purpose.
What experts do agree on is that these shapes have been here a long time, most likely thousands of years.
And that's the strange thing, because it doesn't really mesh with the popular perceptions about the Amazon.
For a long time, experts have believed that prior to the arrival of the Spanish in the 16th century, the Amazon was only sparsely populated by groups of small nomadic tribes.
It was thought that the environment was too harsh to support large groups of people, especially settled groups that would have the ability and wherewithal to build these sorts of earthworks.
These aren't the work of small nomadic tribes. To make these hundreds or even thousands of years ago would have taken an enormous amount of collective effort.
But here's the thing. Ever since the 16th century, Spanish conquistadors spoke of sophisticated societies and even whole cities hidden deep within the Amazon rainforest.
These places have come to be known as the lost cities of the Amazon.
Could these deserted earthworks, seen from above, be the remnants of a long-lost civilization? And do they support the centuries-old rumors of great cities in the jungle?
From the early to mid-1500s, these Spanish conquistadors and their armies swept across Central and South America in an effort to conquer this new world.
The colonizers met various indigenous groups and conquered several cities.
Like the Incan capital of Cusco in Peru, and Tenochtitlan in Mexico.
But the Europeans began hearing talk of another city, an incredible place with food and riches beyond belief, where the chief even covered himself in gold dust.
The rumors of this golden city is what eventually became the legend of El Dorado.
Many explorers went out looking for the city of El Dorado, but came up empty-handed. They did, however, return with some unbelievable stories.
There were reports of other large settlements, way bigger than the Europeans could even fathom.
They reported that these communities had sophisticated methods of farming and described them as being rich with harvests of maize, oats, and other foods.
These stories of El Dorado and other great Amazonian cities have been chalked up to tall tales brought back by the European explorers.
In the history books, these cities have all gone down as myth.
But over the years, that hasn't stopped people from looking.
Percy Fawcett was a British explorer from the early 1900s who was obsessed with the idea of an ancient civilization hidden within the rainforest.
In total, he took 7 expeditions into the Amazon in search of what he called the City of Zed.
Fawcett focused on 2 areas, the southern Amazon in Brazil and the western Amazon in Bolivia.
But he didn't find anything close to what the Spanish conquistadors claimed to have seen.
He did meet indigenous people, but described them in his writings as living in small groups and villages.
Despite having found no signs of large jungle cities, Fawcett remained undaunted. Tirelessly, he continued his hunt for the city of Zed, a search that would end in tragedy.
On his final expedition in 1925, Percy Fawcett and his team vanished. They were never heard from again.
Did Fawcett and his team die for nothing? Did they sacrifice their lives for what many considered a fool's errand? Or do these earthworks hint at a different story, as advances in aerial archaeology begin to rewrite the history books?
While he may not have found his lost city of Zed, is it possible that Fawcett was onto something? Do these hundreds of shapes prove that there were large populations living all throughout the jungle?
These satellite images, along with new discoveries in LiDAR technology, hint at the possibility that the idea of lost cities in the Amazon may be more than a myth.
We live in an age where you can cover more area from the sky than you could in a lifetime with boots on the ground.
And these present-day explorers are using a form of remote sensing known as LiDAR, which stands for Light Detection and Ranging.
LiDAR imaging scans the terrain by bouncing pulses of laser light off the ground from either a helicopter, drone, or other forms of aircraft.
In a way, LiDAR lets researchers see through the dense vegetation. It's kind of like having X-ray vision.
With the ability to see through the dense jungle canopy, researchers can make detailed maps of the features and terrain underneath.
So if there are lost cities to be found, there's a good chance we might be able to see them with this new vantage.
Almost 20,000 kilometers away, a major discovery was made with a view from above the jungles of Cambodia. In 2012, a team of researchers using LiDAR technology discovered remnants of an ancient city belonging to the Khmer Empire.
The Khmer Empire existed between the 9th and 15th centuries and was centered around the famous Angkor Wat complex.
And about 40 kilometers north of Angkor Wat, these researchers mapped the jungle floor to reveal parts of another city known as Mahendra Parvata.
Using LiDAR sensors mounted onto a helicopter, they were able to map the layout of this ancient city.
They discovered 30 previously unidentified temples, along with a grid-like system of roads and canals.
While Angkor Wat was established in the 12th century, the recent discoveries at Mahendra Parvata are believed to be much older.
The city has been dated to the year 802 CE, meaning it predates Angkor Wat by roughly 350 years.
Hidden in the jungles for over 1,200 years, it's believed that Mahendra Parvata was likely the first capital of the Khmer Empire.
These new discoveries are a real leap forward in our collective understanding of the Khmer Empire's history.
It's a perfect example of the power of modern aerial technology, like LiDAR, to unearth mysteries from the past.
This exact same technology is being used to scan the jungle floors of the Amazon in search of lost cities.
And what's been found may finally solve a centuries-old mystery and upend our entire understanding of the Amazon's history. In Bolivia, high above the dense canopy of the Mojos Plains, LiDAR images reveal something shocking: more geometric shapes and earthen mounds.
There are circles, squares, rectangles, and U-shaped formations. Remnants of what experts agree are ancient settlements.
Archaeologists have found raised earthen platforms with steps, some of which have evidence of pyramidal structures as tall as 22 meters.
Excavations have also revealed ancient artifacts and over 100 burial sites. That suggests a complex society with a social hierarchy.
And by the Xingu River in Brazil, archaeologists have found more giant ditches. When mapped, they revealed the remnants of a large ancient settlement.
Circular walls built around a central plaza with sections that experts believe were used as gardens, orchards, and even areas of managed forest.
Could this ancient settlement be what the Spanish conquistadors saw? And does it point to the possibility of other lost cities in the Amazon? In the area, a wider view from above reveals something incredible. Evidence indicating a number of similar settlements. And even more shocking, many of these sites appear to have once been connected by a network of ancient roads.
Believe it or not, if you take all these adjoining settlements and you put them all together, it's about the size of Belgium.
In Bolivia, archaeologists have even found evidence of large canals, aqueducts, and reservoirs. There is data indicating instances of severe droughts in the Amazon over the centuries. So is it possible that these were built to mitigate against this type of event?
To manage a consistent water supply like this would have taken expert engineering.
The result is this incredible system to redirect water and transform the Amazon into a thriving and sustainable agricultural landscape.
Researchers aren't sure how and why all of these systems were created, but potential uses range from crop irrigation to drinking water and even the farming of fish. And shockingly, in Bolivia's Llanos de Mojos, researchers have uncovered scores of other ancient settlements.
This contradicts our previous beliefs about the Amazon in pre-Hispanic times, that it was too harsh an environment to support large-scale societies.
What the evidence is revealing is that some of these settlements could have had populations in the thousands.
So when they put this all together, it forms this new way of seeing things, that this vast network of communities could have connected millions of people.
No wonder the 16th century conquistadors were amazed. These large jungle populations would have dwarfed many of Europe's cities at the time. So if these great cities existed, where did all the people go?
It's believed that they were mostly wiped out from diseases brought over by the Europeans.
It's estimated that 80 to 95% of the people living in the Amazon died from smallpox and measles that was spread by the first generation of Spanish colonizers.
So Percy Fawcett was looking in the right places all along. But by the early 1900s, the indigenous populations he was looking for had largely been decimated.
And unlike the stone cities of the Inca Empire, for example, these lost cities of the Amazon were built of soil and wood, which would have rotted and eroded with time.
But the advent of modern aerial technology is allowing us to peer into the Amazon's past and grasp a new and much larger picture of its complex societies and cultures.
We are just beginning to comprehend the scale and the scope of these ancient Amazonian cities and how they could have functioned.
But one thing's for sure, the early people of the Amazon managed a robust civilization. They weren't only able to survive, but thrive in what is still one of the world's harshest environments.
It's a history and a legacy that may have disappeared forever had it not been for a high-tech view from above. Some spots are left abandoned for millennia before they're discovered, while others appear to have been deserted much more recently. In the Bolu province of northwestern Turkey, the view from above reveals another strange and unexpected mystery. Hidden within a large valley, drone footage captures this strange and astonishing sight.
What is this place?
It looks like something from a dream.
Or a nightmare.
Row upon row of what look to be identical fairy tale castles.
And what's just as strange is that the entire place appears to be abandoned.
There are over 500 of these turreted castles, and not a person in sight.
At first glance, it's difficult to make out the scale of these buildings. They almost look like doll houses or the sort of miniature models they use in movies.
But a closer look reveals that the castles are indeed full scale, each the size of a large suburban home. Can the view from above provide answers? This time, just over 1,500 kilometers to the southwest, over the island nation of Malta.
This is a small harbor village nestled in a place called Anchor Bay. Now, at first glance, it appears to be an idyllic little fishing town.
But the crazy thing about this town is that it's not a real place.
The entire town is fictional.
If you're familiar with the cartoon character Popeye the Sailor Man, you know that he lives in the town of Sweet Haven.
And in 1979, Hollywood began production on a live-action Popeye movie starring Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall. Rather than filming in studio, they shot here in Malta, building an entire real-life set for Sweet Haven.
They shipped in hundreds of logs and wood planks from the Netherlands, and they imported all these wooden shingles from Canada.
It took a construction crew of 165 over 7 months to build the set.
When filming was wrapped, instead of tearing it all down, the set was just left intact. Over 40 years later, it's still here.
Were these castles in Turkey built as part of another elaborate film set?
Now, building hundreds of identical castles as a movie backdrop seems like overkill, even for the biggest Hollywood blockbuster. There must be some other explanation.
Over Southeast Asia, the view from above may offer another potential answer. In the Philippines and the municipality of Lemery, an aerial vantage reveals an eerily similar sight.
It looks like a rundown fairy tale castle.
It doesn't look very old, and yet it appears to be abandoned.
This castle in the Philippines is larger than the ones in Turkey, and there's only one, but it's similarly cartoonish. There's a reason that this castle and the hundreds of Turkish castles all share what you might call a fairy tale look.
And the explanation can be seen with a view over southern Germany.
This is Neuschwanstein Castle. It's a 19th century palace built into the foothills of the Alps.
Neuschwanstein Castle was built by Ludwig II in the late 1800s, and he was known as the fairy tale king because he was famous for building these large, elaborate palaces at a time when such castles were no longer needed for protection.
And Neuschwanstein Castle was the inspiration for many of the iconic fairy tale castles we've come to know in classic animated movies.
So it's not surprising that Neuschwanstein also inspired this castle in the Philippines, which sits on the property of a failed theme park.
This is, or was, a place called Fantasy World Philippines, a planned amusement park with a medieval theme.
But the project failed to take off, and the park never opened.
Now, all 74 acres are overgrown and left to rot, with the large empty castle right in the middle.
Is this what we're seeing in Turkey? The remains of an abandoned amusement park?
But this is possibly the worst theme park in the world. There are no rides anywhere. It's nothing but castles as far as the eye can see. It's probably not a theme park.
Why would anyone build so many structures with such a strange theme?
A clue may be found over 8,000 kilometers away in Wanli District, Taiwan. With a view from above uncovers another collection of strange structures.
This is surreal.
It almost looks like the ruins of a Martian settlement.
These buildings definitely look otherworldly.
And upon closer inspection, the buildings also appear to be abandoned.
What are these things?
Who built them? And for what reason?
This place is known as UFO Village, and it's located on the country's northern coast, which also happens to be a popular resort destination.
These flying saucer-shaped buildings first appeared in the 1970s, of course, with the construction of a unique vacation community.
It was a resort, essentially built to look like a futuristic space colony, and it was actually pretty popular in the early years.
But then the project kind of lost steam and it fell into disrepair, and then the whole community was basically abandoned.
And now, this UFO village is a decaying relic of the past, rather than an inspiring vision of the future.
Were these Turkish castles part of another grandiose vision gone wrong?
Perhaps the answer lies closer. What else will the view from above reveal? Just a short distance from the castles, another strange and desolate sight.
Once again, we've got rows of identical buildings. These aren't castles, but they are abandoned.
What's going on here? And could that somehow relate to the hundreds of castles that are just a little ways away?
This is an abandoned development project called Sorrow Country, and like the UFO Village, it was conceived as a resort community.
The development was put on pause after a downturn in the economy, leaving it as an unfinished ghost town.
But before that, it was going to be a luxury spa village with a giant indoor beach and heated swimming pools in every home.
And the reason the developers could promise all of this has everything to do with where Sorrow Country is located.
It sits on top of a bunch of underground hot springs.
In fact, Turkey has more than 1,000 natural hot springs, famous for their supposed therapeutic and healing properties.
And these hot springs that exist under Sorrow Country can also be found nearby, under the hundreds of castles.
Turns out those fairy tale castles were just part of another planned community by the exact same developer.
The place was to be called Burj Al Babas. Burj meaning tower or turret, and Al Babas as a nod to a renowned hot spring spa in the area.
Because of these spas and the area's temperate climate, this area is hugely popular with visitors from all over the Middle East.
So Burj Al Babas was marketed to wealthy foreigners from oil-rich countries like Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, who wanted to be the kings and queens of their own private castles.
Each castle cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to build, and $200 million was ultimately sunk into construction.
But a global financial crisis, political turmoil, plummeting oil prices hit the developers and their wealthy buyers in the pocket.
So along with the Soro country development, the castle project was ultimately abandoned.
What was once a fairy tale dream for the uber-wealthy became a financial nightmare, leaving behind this haunting reminder that not all stories end with a happily ever after. From hundreds of empty castles in a deserted valley to another abandoned location in a place with a storied past. Nearly 800 kilometers away, in the Argolic Gulf of Greece, the view from above reveals a mysterious stone structure that appears to be emerging from the sea.
It looks to be some sort of fortress or castle.
A closer look reveals that it occupies a small uninhabited island.
What is this place? And why is it deserted?
It's called Burtsi Castle, which translates to Tower Castle. And with a bird's eye view, you can see that its footprint takes up almost the entire island.
Who built this castle? And when?
You've got to ask, was this castle actually inhabited at some point? Because no one lives there now. The Greek novelist Andreas Karkavitsis once described this place as a beautiful cave that hid 3 dragons. But what did he actually mean by that?
What is this castle fortress doing on this tiny island?
Island castles can be found all over the world, including St. Michael's Mount in England, Trakai Island Castle in Lithuania, and scores of others. But why build these isolated island fortresses? Could the view from above offer insights? This time, in the Mediterranean Sea, just off the Turkish coast.
In Turkey, you've got this castle island called Kiskalise. Now, as legend has it, that was built after a fortune teller tells the king that his daughter will be poisoned by a deadly snake. So what the king does is to build a castle on a snake-free island to keep his daughter safe.
But as the story goes, a snake manages to hide in a basket of food from the mainland, poisoning the princess and fulfilling the psychic's prophecy.
Whether or not it's true, the fact that we've got legends like this shows just how long people have been building these types of fortifications.
Island castles were, of course, often built to protect rulers and their people from threats of foreign invasion.
Could this be what we're seeing in the Argolic Gulf? An island castle built for protection? An even higher vantage from above may offer answers.
When we zoom out from the castle, we see that this tiny island is situated within a harbor.
This is the port of Nafplio. It's in Greece. And an understanding of the city's history provides us with a really important piece to this puzzle.
At one time, Nafplio was ruled by the Venetians. While we think of Venice today as a sleepy tourist attraction, there was a time when Venice, Italy, was the center of a powerful maritime republic.
The Republic of Venice existed for roughly 1,000 years between the 7th century and 18th century, and it was a significant economic power in the region.
Towards the end of the Middle Ages, it controlled areas in northern Italy, as well as on the Dalmatian coast, in Crete, and a number of small colonies all around the Mediterranean Sea.
These were called the Stato di Mar, or State of the Sea, which included this part of Greece.
Once the Venetians had seized the city of Nafplio, they had it completely fortified by the year 1473.
It turns out that this tiny island, right in the city's harbour, was really well placed. Because what it did is offered a front line of defence against attackers, and especially pirates that operated in the sea nearby. Burtsi Castle was used defensively in this way for centuries, until about 1865, after the conflict had kind of settled in the region, and the Greeks had finally regained the city of Nafplio.
At that point, Burtsi was no longer needed as a defensive fortress. But that's not why it's abandoned today.
After this defensive position no longer was needed, what became of the castle? And why was it ultimately abandoned?
Could the view from above reveal another potential clue? Nearby, perched on a hill, over 200 meters up, another castle.
This is the fortress of Palamidi. And like Burtsi Castle, in the harbor, it was also built by the Venetians.
Palamidi Fortress is considered to be one of the finest examples of Venetian fortifications in Greece, and it's famous for the 999 stairs leading up to its doors.
What can the history of this fortress teach us about the island castle in the harbor below?
The construction of Palamidi was an ambitious project, and it was finished in just 3 short years.
This is in part because it is believed prisoners were forced to help build this place, including all those steps leading up the hill. And ironically, over the years, parts of the fortress were also used to jail prisoners.
And this is where the tiny island castle comes back in.
Not all island fortifications are meant to keep people out. Some are used to keep them in. And a famous example can be found off the coast of California, on the island of Alcatraz. Stretching approximately 9 hectares, this rugged island, the site of an infamous former prison, has been aptly nicknamed The Rock. The site was chosen in the 1800s due to the cold waters and rapid currents that surround the imposing island.
Now, it was originally designed as a military fortification and a military prison. Alcatraz was converted to a federal penitentiary in the early 1930s.
Over the course of its time as a federal penitentiary, Alcatraz held more than 1,500 prisoners, including the notorious American crime boss, Al Capone.
And in all its years of operation, the prison is said to have had no inmate make a successful escape.
The infamous Rock was said to be escape-proof. But according to records, a total of 36 inmates tried their luck regardless. But all were either captured, shot, or worse.
Some tried to break out and swim to freedom, but were most likely taken by the cold waters and currents that surround the island prison.
Like the notorious Alcatraz, Bortzi Castle began as a military fortress, but over time, did its purpose evolve?
By the early 1800s, Greece has regained control of the city, and they're still using the fortress of Palamidi as a prison.
At the time, the death penalty was a common punishment, and the city even had its very own guillotine for this reason.
But every execution needs an executioner, a very unenviable task.
So the job of beheading prisoners was forced upon a few unfortunate souls.
And these were people who also happened to be convicts themselves.
These executioners couldn't be housed with the condemned up the hill in Palamidi, and the townspeople below certainly didn't want them living in Nafplio. So the executioners were banished to the island, which wasn't being used for anything else at the time.
Apparently, they were only allowed out, accompanied by prison guards, to perform the executions.
These killings were primarily done by 3 people, which is what the novelist Andreas Karkavitsas meant when he called Bortzi a beautiful cave that hid 3 dragons.
For decades, this place was an executioner's island, until Greece put an end to capital punishment by guillotine.
And that's why the fortress now sits here, uninhabited on this tiny Greek island.
From a lone castle abandoned in Greek waters to hundreds of fairy tale castles left vacant in a valley, lost cities in the Amazon, and Roman military camps long forgotten. These deserted places all hold keys to our past, mysteries being slowly unraveled with a view from above.